And welcome back. It is Monday on the Catholic Convert Show. As usual, you've got me, the worst host in internet history, and you've got Ed, the second worst host in internet history. Slightly better than me, but that's just because he's got a lot of experience that came with his age. But we're back, and we are assaulting your eardrums. And what's going on, brother?
Well, been around. Not much. I've got experience because I've been around since the invention of the radio. So, I've been on a few shows.
Sounds about right. For some reason, I think there's a story there, and I don't know why this popped up. It's kind of got this soprano vibe to it. Um, but wasn't there this weird controversy about who invented the radio? It was like supposed to be one guy gets credit, but there was this other guy that, like, I think his last name was Marconi,
Yeah.
and he was an Italian guy they stole the patent from or something like that.
Yeah, it's kind of like, you got Marconi and the other dude as far as the radio. And it's the same thing like with Edison and Tesla. Like, who really gave us the light bulb and all that sort of fun stuff? Who gave us AC? Who gave
Yeah,
us
and then there was
DC?
another one with
It's
Alexander Graham Bell. It was the same thing.
yeah, exactly. Always controversy. Always lots of controversy out there. Conspiracy theories aren't a new
Always
thing. They've been
stealing
around
from the
forever.
Italians.
I don't know anything about that.
In this house, Christopher Columbus is a hero. I just watched that episode the other night on The Sopranos.
Hey, I live right down the street from a city that was for the longest part 80% Italian, and it was about, I guess, about 5 years ago now that they took down the Columbus statue from the park that was named Columbus. So yeah, crazy stuff out there. Crazy stuff.
Yeah, don't even get me started on the whole taking down statues thing.
Uh, it's great. It's nuts.
Yeah, I'm like, bro, it's a statue. If you don't agree with it, leave it alone. We have to put up with
Mm-hmm.
like modern art statues everywhere that looks like something a blind 3-year-old made with Play-Doh. But I mean, okay, sure. I'll tell you what, though. We had obviously the Feast of Corpus Christi this past weekend, yesterday, actually. Um, I was originally supposed to be carrying a one of the canopy bears that covers, the priest carrying the sacrament as we went on the Eucharistic procession, and my son, who's an altar server, he was supposed to be at the front, and he was carrying the banner right in front of the guy who was carrying the massive crucifix. And like I spent 3 or 4 hours running through the procession route and everything on Saturday. We were building like setting up the altars for the outside, putting tents over them, all this other stuff. And then yesterday morning, about 9 o'clock in the morning, I got a text message from our parish priest. He's like, "Oh, we're gonna do the procession indoors today because it's probably going to be pouring down rain." Now, it didn't start raining until after the indoor procession was finished, right? But it was like, "Oh, we don't want to risk it." So I wasn't a canopy bear. My son still led the procession, but I was thinking about what June really means as far as uh, celebrating and the devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. And I put an article out on Saturday, and metaphorically, the heart is the center of all love, all emotion. That's what we use in our vernacular every day. He took it to heart. He's speaking from the heart. He broke his heart. Da 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 da. Right. And when I look at some of the interactions that I see online, it's really hard for me to maintain that balance because part of me is like, All right, let me go get my chainmail, and it's time to start the next crusade, right? And then the other side of me is like, well, I also need to be more compassionate. I need to be more understanding. I need to be able to meet people where they are because that's what Christ did. He met people where they were. You know, I hate the argument that people make. Well, Jesus, he hung out with prostitutes and tax collectors and all kinds of sinners. I'm like, yeah, you know, but he didn't go and sit with them to like celebrate them or affirm their sin. He sat with them so he could tell them the truth and love them and tell them to go forth and sin no more. Right. And then you see the ones that are coming out with these just blatantly over the top false accusations or claims against Catholicism. They're just, blatant outright lies. And it's enough to really take you off. And it's really hard to try to find that balance between, yeah, you cannot be lukewarm in the faith. You do have to be unapologetic in your faith. You have to defend the faith uh, as necessary. And when I say as necessary, I don't mean by any means necessary. I mean by the means that are necessary for the situation. Obviously, if Catholics were being targeted for physical violence, well, then the actions necessary would be physical violence in response, or at least in defense of, right? But for the most part, when I look at the way some people want to get into these just downright name calling ad hominem attack arguments, one side of me goes, yeah, get them, you know? And the other side goes, you let your emotions get the best of you. Now you look like a hypocrite, you know? Because when we're trying to bring people to the church, when we're trying to, bring people to Christ, we we tend to forget that conversion isn't a moment. It doesn't happen in a moment, right? It's something that takes place on a timeline, and that timeline is very unique to every individual out there. And obviously, we're all human. Obviously, we're all going to have places where we fall short. But I think most of it is on social media. I mean, the way I look at some of the things that I see on social media is it's like if you're walking downtown and you're like, oh, gonna go out and check out this spot for lunch. And then you see a guy on the street and he comes up to you and goes, hey, have you heard about Jesus? And you're like, sir, I'm just trying to get a bite to eat. Because, well, if you haven't heard about Jesus, you're going to hell. Okay, have a good day, sir. And then he like starts physically or verbally assaulting you. And it's like, oh yeah, you really talked me into it there, buddy. Yeah, it's the same thing we see online. It's the online tough guy. Like, would you really be out beating people and calling them names in like the public square if you're standing there holding a rosary up in the air, you know, saying Mary points to Christ, all valid practices and true things. But then when someone goes, you're just worshiping Mary, and then you went over there and you tried to strangle him with the rosary. I mean, if you're interested in a book about someone being strangled with a rosary, my friend Adam has a really cool heavy metal Christian fiction um, series. It takes place in a dystopian future where you've got priests and nuns all wearing armor and they're battling a satanic cult that's trying to steal children. So, yeah, that's a great thing. But that's not what we're supposed to be doing in 2024 when people have a disagreement about faith, or when people have Just anything really negative to say about Catholicism in general. Oh, I mean, don't get me wrong, it makes me mad too, right? But if someone sat there and told Christ that he was a fool and he was a liar, which obviously we know a ton of people did, he didn't break out into these tirades and ranting and attacking them and calling them names. And some of the stuff that I find myself as having a proclivity to do when I see people just blatantly telling a lie or blatantly, you know, attacking Catholicism or Catholics in general, I'm like, bro, step into the ring with me. Come on. Let's see if you still say that afterwards. And I'm like, yeah, it's just instinctual because you want to protect and defend the thing you love. We love the Catholic faith. We love Jesus and we love our Blessed Mother. But it's really hard to walk in that example. So I find myself struggling to maintain a balance of I should be a theologian, I should be a monk, and I should be a crusader, like just taking back the kingdom of Jerusalem so we stop hearing about Israel and Palestine on the news. Get a whole news story going. I really do struggle with that balance. And then while struggling with that balance, the good old Catholic guilt stick, kind of kicks in. And so I sit here at my desk, or I'm sitting there in the adoration chapel, or I'm sitting there in the pew at mass, and I'm just, you suck, bro. Like, you really suck at being a good Catholic. Like, you suck. And it's really hard to not go down that. And then you have to, well, we're never, ever, ever going to be worthy. But are you trying to justify it? Are you making an excuse?
Yeah.
And so it's this round and round thing. So you've obviously been a Catholic much longer than I have, uh, almost three times as long as I've been alive. So my question for you is this: is that normal? Because I'm the
Yeah.
convert here.
Uh, yes and no. It's normal for guys like me who are how many decades into it, still very fired up about their faith. But I, you don't see a lot of guys my age defending the church to that extent, just because it's been a part of their life their entire life. And so we've talked about that before, you get to fall into that complacency, that whole, yeah, I go to church every Sunday, and I show up for the holy day of obligation, and so I got this covered. But you don't have that fire for the faith. Um, but I do. And you mentioned about how your conversion isn't like a boom, a one time thing, and I find that to be very true. It's kind of like, Paul says you have to work out your salvation in fear and trembling. I think you have to work out your faith in general in that same way. You've got to approach it every single day when you wake up as though I've got so much more to do in regards to my faith. And I think if you do that, it will serve you very well. It flies in the face of things like the whole once saved, always saved, which I think that is something that if you believe, it, it it helps you to fall into that trap of, okay, I've I've publicly stated that I love and follow and believe Jesus, so now I can just kind of kick back until that wonderful day where I'm raptured or whatever. And and obviously you can't do that. You've got to work on it on a daily basis. And um we do fall into that trap though as Catholics sometimes of you're talking about being online and seeing what people say, and wanting to just kind of almost get into fisticuffs with somebody because they're talking about the Blessed Mother, because they're talking about the Catholic Church. But and then you mentioned the whole thing about Catholic guilt. I think Catholic guilt gets a bad rap because it's sometimes that
Oh,
Catholic
no,
guilt
I'm not saying
that
Catholic guilt's a
that brings
bad thing. It keeps me accountable,
Oh, okay.
right? It keeps me
It does, because
accountable.
it keeps you humble. Yeah, it keeps you humble,
Yeah,
and it makes
100%.
you realize.
But
Yeah.
what I'm
So
getting at
so that
with the thing about conversion is when you see people
yeah.
online and they're talking about, you know, let's take what's his name, that guy Brian Burgess, for example. You've seen him on Twitter.
Yeah.
He posts these very detailed, very deep theological arguments. Uh,
Mhm.
Arguments for those of you who are listening in the terms of apologetics, um, backing things up with scripture, church tradition, all of it. And somebody will come out and they just make some wild, insane take or reply or comment to him. And then I see other Catholics jump into the replies.
Mhm.
Brian never does this. I mean, at least uh,
No.
not that I have
Brian's great.
seen. I'm not going to say never he's done it, but I see other Catholics jump in and then they start making these weird, almost as damaging and unchristlike kind of retaliatory comments that you see coming from like the hyper militant evangelicals, the fire and brimstone
Yeah.
preaching crowd. And it makes me stop and think. It's like, okay, conversion is not something, it's not a moment, it's a journey. It takes place on a timeline, and that timeline is longer or shorter. Like, man, it took me 27 years after leaving the Protestant church to come to the Catholic church. Some guy telling me
Yeah.
that I would regret not acknowledging the truth of the church that Christ founded in 33 AD online certainly would not have made my conversion faster. Even when I started to say, okay, I
No.
might be being pulled in one direction or another towards the church, it took me 18 months to go from I'm thinking about it, I have questions, to showing up at mass one Sunday morning with my family. It was an 18-month thing. But the way people are reacting
Yeah.
to non-Catholics asking questions or even making uh statements in debate for what a Catholic says online. For that Catholic to then
Mhm.
turn around and turn into that weird fire and brimstone kind of attitude guy, whether it's calling them names
Yeah.
or telling them they don't understand and this and that and the other. To me, it seems like if there was a non-Catholic who was genuinely interested in, like I was 18 months before I stepped foot into mass, saw a Catholic acting that way online, it would be like, oh, yeah, they're just like all the rest of them out there, telling
Yeah.
me I'm gonna go to hell and da. And what's crazy about it is when I think of that, it reminds me of the story of I think his name is Dennis. He's a Lutheran guy who's been very contemplative about joining the
Oh,
Catholic
yeah.
Church. He even went to mass once. He might go again next week, but he's been doing this
Yeah.
really hard deep dives. Well, he went to go talk to the priest at the church after he went to his first mass because he made an appointment to speak with the priest. And he said, "You know what's funny is the priest sat there and he listened to me. He answered my questions. He asked me questions, and then by the end of it, we talked for an hour, and he never once told me that I needed to join the church. He told
Mhm.
me this is a deeply personal decision and that he was available if I had any more questions. And that right there is what made him go, Yeah, I'm pulled even harder to conversion now because I didn't have the priest telling me I needed to convert. He embodied the role of Christ in being the one who listens, the one who offers healing, who offers understanding. And I think that's a huge problem with a lot of these Catholics online. Yes, we are fired up about our faith. Yes, if someone's attacking my actual church, I'm going to be on the news. Okay, I'm going to be on the news. You
Yeah.
know, but when I know it's hard. It's an impulse control thing. It's a thing with men. We don't back down from challenges, especially when we feel like some rando on the other side of the internet who probably can't bench press as much as us, who's probably never fought in the ring. You know, and we're like, he can't talk to me that way. I'll show him a thing or two. But that's off-putting for the other potential converts out there, and they're like, oh, these people
Mhm.
are no different than those weird Protestant evangelical, fire and brimstone tent revival people that want to beat me in the face with the Bible and tell me repent or I'm going to hell. Because that's off putting. Nobody likes being preached at.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And I just think
But
it's
but you see,
it's kind of
I think there's
self-defeating in what we're trying to do.
yeah, there's two aspects there, and one thing is that whole concept of you were saying earlier about um, yeah, you want to jump in. You're a man. You're a Catholic. You want to jump in. You want to defend the church. You want to defend the Blessed Mother. You want to defend Christ and the faith. But there's also an ego aspect to it. Is you want to be the person who converts this guy who is saying things. You want to be the guy that convinces them that the Catholic Church is the way to go. And which is not going to happen from what you're saying through Twitter and things like that. And especially if you are using the fire and brimstone approach. But what we have to understand is that if I'm not going to convert a single person, you're not going to convert a single person. You, the Holy Spirit's going to convert somebody. I can give the, like you're talking about, that Brian, who gives a great apologetics lesson to anyone who's willing to listen.
Like his
He
exegesis
doesn't
is incredible.
finish it by
I don't
saying
see
you
how he's
darn
got the
well better
time to do
believe.
all that.
He's phenomenal. It blows my mind. It's got to be his full-time gig is just working on Twitter. But but that's what I'm saying is that I can give you the information, but whether you convert or not, I think back to Saint Dominic back when he was cruising around in France trying to defeat Albigensianism. And he always wanted to be in the front lines because back then, when you defeated a heresy, you did it physically. You did it through having your army be better than the other army. And
Oh
Dominic
yeah.
wanted to be in the front lines, and he kept getting these messages that said, "No, you stay in the back. You stay in the church. You lead the people in the rosary." And he's like, "Man, I want to be there in the trenches." And I would say by him being in the back and leading people through prayer, how many years later now, who knows how many people that his witness and his prayer led to Christ and led to the church. Whereas if he had thrown himself into the front of it, into the Fury, I don't know what that is. Anyway, it probably never would have happened. So that's the thing. We're guys. We want to be in the thick of it. We want to be out there yelling and screaming at people saying, you better believe what I believe. But that doesn't do any good. You give them the truth, you present people with the truth, and then you back off and you let the Holy Spirit do the rest. And that's what I struggle with that. I mean, I try to, like, on Twitter and things like that, I try to maintain a bit of calm, and I try to answer people's questions, and I try to respond nicely. But man, after so many of those coming back at you, you're a pagan, you're you're a Satan worshiper, you're a this, you're a that because you're Catholic. Sometimes I will admit I I get a little bit testy, shall we say? But I've been working on that. I've been praying about that, and I've been trying to avoid having that reaction. And I say, listen, here's the truth of our faith. You're welcome to ask me more questions. You're welcome to do whatever. But but I'm not going to respond the way you are. I'm not going to get fired up. I'm not going to get crazy. I'm not going to curse at you and things like that. So it's tough. It's tough. You know, we're guys. We want to get up there. We want to, you want to swing those fists a little bit, but that's not going to help anybody. It's not going to help anything. And it's certainly not going to bring anybody to the church.
Yeah, and dude, I totally get it. It's usually the same ad hominem attacks over and over and over, and it's like, you know what, man? I struggle with that one main line of thought. If you had an IQ that was above room temperature, you wouldn't be making that argument because you can see how it's an illogical fallacy. you know, but I struggle with
Yeah. Yeah.
trying to find that balanced line of vehemently crusading for the faith while following Christ's teaching.
Yeah.
And then I beat myself up when I fall short of it. And I'm like, all right, I'll try again. And then the Catholic guilt hits me because I definitely screwed up that time. And it's like, that old, was it? There's two wolves inside of you. Well, listen, if you do have two wolves
Yeah.
inside of you, you need to call the police. But it's like there's a battle of those two little cartoon angel demon on your shoulders that you always saw in like the Tom and Jerry cartoons back in the day. But it's like over here, you've got a monk. Over here, you've
Yeah.
got like a crusader in full battle armor ready to go. And you're being like pulled. And listen, there's nothing attractive about the monk lifestyle to like the male psyche and the male ego, right? It's like, no, I want to be out there a warrior for the faith. Okay, cool. Yeah. But then you get carried away and you end up doing the exact opposite of what you should be doing. There's, I think the word I'm looking for here is temperance.
That could be what.
There has to be a temperance into what you're doing. You can't go full blown passive because you are called to defend the faith, but you can't go full blown Deus Vault activated. You know, you can't do that either, because then you end up being a hypocrite. You're turning into this convert or die kind of embodiment, right? And like, I mean, I know it's not easy. I've struggled with it just this past year, and it's like, well, who are you to call yourself a Catholic? Who are you to call yourself a good Catholic? What do you mean you hypocritical jerk going into mass and you're shaking hands with the priest and you're, having all these functions and stuff for the men in the parish, and here you are, jerk. And it's like, all right, I'm humbled again. I humbled myself. Thank you, Catholic guilt. You know? And then it's like, how do I do better? And then the next day you go out and you do the same thing all over again. And I get it. There's people out there that are never, ever, ever going to argue in good faith. And sometimes you really just want to slap them hard enough to make them just lay down for about 10 minutes. Right? You want to do that. That's the human side. But
Yeah.
you got to look at it. And this is to me, this is to you, this is to everybody watching, everybody listening. You have to look at it as this: your goal is to save souls. That's the whole goal and the role that we've been put on. We are here to honor God, and we do that by helping to save souls. You are not going to save a soul if the souls that are genuinely and just genuinely interested in coming to the church and they see you behaving like a violent, angry zealot online. They're like, why would I want to associate myself with these people? Just not going to work.
Yeah, that's it's true. Yeah, it's like I said, like when I'm walking on the boardwalk or wherever, and you've got the guy who's jumping up on a bench, and he's got the bullhorn, and he's waving the Bible, and he's screaming at me, "Do you know Jesus? Have you been saved?" And I say, "Yeah, I'm doing all right. Right. I'm Catholic." And then they start screaming about me how I got to repent right there and then, and how he's willing to baptize me in the ocean that's right behind him, and all the other fun stuff. And I, there's, I'm not, I'm just going to keep walking. There's nothing intriguing about that. There's nothing that's drawing me in. You people are going to know you by your actions. They're going to respond to you based on your actions. And so if you're a screaming, raving lunatic, people are going to avoid you. If they see you just behaving in a good way, in a rational way, then they might be more intrigued by what you have to say. So I'm telling you, it's tough. It's tough. But I'm trying to take on that persona of just behaving in a proper Christian/Catholic manner, and hoping that my behavior is going to appeal to people. And they're going to say, you know what? Whatever that guy's got, whatever he has that's making him so happy and making him reach out in a kind and
Prozac.
cordial manner, I want some of that. And so I'm going to talk to him about it. And is that what it is? No, 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 no,
My buddy Clint gave me a quote earlier today, and it's attributed to Saint Francis of Assisi. It says, "Preach the gospel every single day, and when necessary, use words." And I love that because it's exactly what I'm talking about. Like, you can say all day long and stand up on the bench with a bullhorn and read from the gospel. And it doesn't matter if while you're reading from the gospel, you're kicking people in the shin as they walk by. It doesn't matter. Your preaching of the gospel is what you do, how you act, how you treat people every single day. You know, and I love Clint because he's about this close to coming into full communion with the church. He was Catholic as a kid. Then he became Orthodox. And then over the past 6 months or so, he's started making his way back to the Catholic Church, and he's gone through pretty much all the stuff he needs to go through. And so, probably within the through sometime this year, I don't know the exact timeline. He told me, but I'm a terrible friend because I barely read their messages. Uh, and it, I read the first two sentences and figured I understood the rest. Um, but this year he'll be in full communion. Him and his wife both will be in full communion with the Catholic Church. But every single day when you get up, your feet hit the floor. Like, guys, listen, you're hardcore. You're a man. You're a warrior for faith. But if you want to try to embody this Templar Knight Crusader kind of thing, it doesn't mean you walk around ready to just slay pagans all day, right? If you really want to fully embody it, it's a full devotion to Christ and his teaching. It is a meekness about you. It is not a chest thumping, arrogant contest that I am guilty of 1,000 times this week. I've done it, right? And so I treat a lot of the stuff that we talk about on this show as more of a reminder to myself, as much as it is for everyone else. I'm giving myself advice here. It's just easier to articulate it when I point the finger at all you dirty sinners out there. but it's there. Meekness is not weakness. Yes, you should be capable of extreme and prejudicial violence as a man, but the temperance that's required to control that you embrace the duality of being a man. What's that old thing? A real man should be able to stack bodies on the front lines all day and then come home and have a tea party with his daughter, or hold a newborn baby, or help that homeless guy to his feet and so you can take him to the diner to get a bite to eat. That is the duality that we're called to embrace fully without slipping too far into either side. Yeah, it's hard. It's I just want to slap the taste out of that guy's mouth because he's talking bad about the Blessed Mother, or he's just completely trash talking the Catholic Church. Some of them might not ever argue in good faith, but if you're going to engage with them, hey man, let me ask you something real quick. Why do you claim this? Okay, can you show me where that is? Because I've been a Catholic for X long, and this is what the church teaches. I want to know what that is and why you think it means this. And it's going to require you to be patient. It's going to require you to be temperate. And guess what? It's going to drive you up the wall because we're men. We're men of action. We like to go and do hard stuff. I'm leading a father son hiking trip up in the mountains this weekend for the guys of my parish. We want to go do the hard, cool stuff. But on that trip, you know what we're going to see? We're going to see these hard charging men who, whether they're vets, they're MMA fighters, they're boxers, all these guys that are just jacked and heavy, lifting heavy. They're going to have their 5-year-old sons out there with them on a 4-mile hike, and they're going to be stooping low to help somebody else's kid up who's bringing more than one kid. They're going to be picking those kids up and carrying them some other way just so we can get to the waterfall and go swimming at the end of the hike. He's not going to be screaming at the kid, go faster, stop being a sissy, rub some salt on it, whatever. And it's that duality that you need to have in your evangelization. You're never going to convert someone by force. Could you have been converted by force? No, you couldn't, right? Because you're defiant. You're going to stand up. You're going to fight back. Well, you're not looking for a fight. You're looking to show them you actually care about them. You're looking to show them that Christ's love is radical. It's a militant love, right? Do you care about them and that's why you're trying to convert them? Or do you want, like Ed said over here, do you want that I converted this guy? Really? It's not your glory, and you didn't convert anyone. Just some thoughts. Now, let's go ahead and make a quick detour because it's time to check out what's in Ed's creepy basement.
Uh-oh. Well, actually, today, what I did was I didn't go down into the basement. I went into the living room um, because I've got creepy stuff everywhere. But if you go back to the turn of the last century,
You're a blast at
you
dinner
go back
parties.
to World War One, and I am though I am, uh, but you go back to obviously the U.S. was involved over in Europe in World War One, and a number of the gentlemen who were over there fighting were Catholic, and things were a little bit different back then than they are today, where uh, the government, once the war was over, there wasn't a lot of effort put into getting you back home, and then once you got home, of making sure you were taken care of, and so the uh, the Knights of Columbus, along with the National Catholic War Council. They worked together to put together a program where they raised funds to bring Catholic soldiers home from the European theater, and then once they were home, to help them get back into their daily routine and things like that. So I brought this. So what are we in now? 2024, which means that this poster, which I'm about to show you, is 106 years old, and this is a poster from the end of World War One. It says, see him through. Help us to help the boys." And you see it says National Catholic War Council and the Knights of Columbus. And this is not a reproduction. This is an original. And what happened was people would donate their money to bring our Catholic boys home from Europe after World War One. So that one does not stay down in the archives. That one is proudly displayed in the living quarters of yours truly. And that is our item for today.
Okay, I've considered myself to be a bit of a history buff, you know,
Go ahead.
quite an avid reader. I did not know that there was a less than valiant effort to bring people home from Europe after the war.
It's yeah, look it up. It's quite amazing actually. Well, I don't think it's something that you want advertised, but some of these guys would have been over there for years after the war, if not for this particular effort. So it's very interesting. I mean, it would have been eventually brought back, but it would have taken some time. I guess and of course it was all done
Any
by
particular
ship.
reason? Because now I'm very curious.
Yeah. No, I guess, I mean, because it was done by ship is the first thing. And of course, even and think about it, transatlantic ships. It wasn't the fastest way to get across, and they go back and forth and bring another group of guys over, and I don't know, Jeff. It's one of those mysteries that you just
Oh, so this is
you'll
one of
wonder.
those historical items that you brought out, and then when I ask you questions about it, you're like, "Why did you ask?" Because I was not prepared. Got it.
No, I'm quite prepared. I'm just telling you but look it up. You look up the See Him Through campaign and you'll get the full story on it.
Yeah,
But
yeah. I just
yeah,
said
it's just
Google it, bro.
look. All I can tell you is that it
Because I don't
was
know.
the poster, and no, it was created for the week of November 11th, 1918, to raise money for the end of the war and the subsequent demobilization effort through the United Work campaign. And this particular poster was created by Burton Rice and sponsored by both the Knights of Columbus and the National Catholic War Council, who, despite their differences, came together to help fundraise for the United Work campaign. The poster was most likely created in very early November, after word had already spread that the Germans had agreed to sign an armistice. This poster is different from many others created during the era of the Great War because it aimed to fundraise money for the end of the war. While traditional propaganda qualities exist within the poster itself, such as a call to patriotism, it is not as heavy handed as other posters created during the era. The poster's slogan, See Him Through, emphasized the fact that the men overseas in Europe still needed help and funds to finish through the end of the war until their eventual return home to the United States. At the end of the war, partially due to their success in assisting with the United War campaign, the newly created National Catholic War Council became the more permanent National Catholic Welfare Council, and the Knights of Columbus, a prominent Catholic men's organization founded in 1882, recruited upwards of 400,000 new members. So there you go. Now you know all about the
I mean, I
whole
still don't know why the
see him
government
through
wasn't like, yeah,
program.
we'll get them all home, but okay.
Jim,
Yeah.
you know, you
I'm
gotta,
sorry. I'm
you
sorry.
gotta ask, you know, who's you, you gotta ask somebody. You know what? Next week we're gonna have on a World War I veteran, and he will tell us all about it.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. I bet we're gonna have a World War I veteran.
Well, I know a guy out on the corner here who swears he is a World War I veteran, so
Okay, cool.
who am I
Yeah, I'm not
to
gonna let
deny
Ed
it?
bring anybody. I'm not letting you choose the guests anymore. We're not doing that. But let's go
And
ahead
he
and
looked a little
switch
young to
gears.
me, but
God,
oh, I know.
this is such a terrible episode. All right, we're gonna move on now, and we're gonna check out our saint of the day. It is actually my favorite kind. This one has companions. It is Saint Charles Lwanga and Companions. So Saint Charles Lwanga, is one of 22 Ugandan martyrs, and he's the patron of youth and Catholic action in most of the tropical areas in Africa. Now, he protected his fellow pages between the age of 13 to 30 from the sexual demands of the Bugandan ruler Mwanga. Now, this guy Mwanga, he he was a dictator. He was a warlord, right? He's a ruler, and he had a nefarious appetite for the people that uh, acted as serfs and servants for him. Right, most of them were young boys, or teenagers, or young men, and he would make explicit demands of them, like, "Hey, you come here." Now, Charles Lwanga was a member in the court of uh, Chief. What was it? What was it Chief Mawulu Gungu? And as a catechumen, he entered the royal household as an assistant to this guy who is the head of the court pages. Now, pages are just servants, right? They just serve the royal court, whatever he asked them to do. Well, he had several uh, young pages that he was kind of endeared to, and he protected them. And they were like, "Hey, Mwanga is demanding these things of us," um, and Lwanga was telling them that to resist, um, and sometimes he would interfere when he knew that the ruler was going to be trying to do something on a particular night. He would go in there and he would interfere and he would distract and let the young pages kind of slip away. Well, on the night of uh, John Mukaso, who was the head of the court pages, on the night of his martyrdom, uh, for encouraging the African youths that were there to resist Mwanga and his advances, Charles Lwanga requested and received baptism. Now, he was imprisoned with all of his friends, and then him and his friends were all still, had demands placed on them by this ruler. Um, but it was his courage and their collective belief in God inspired them all to remain chaste. And because of his own unwillingness to submit to the immoral acts, as well as his efforts to safeguard the faith of all of his friends, Charles, St. Charles Lwanga, was burned to death at Namugongo on June 3rd, 1886, um, by people who had been ordered to by the ruler Mwanga. And it was Pope Paul VI canonized these 22 martyrs on October 18th, 1964. And when he did that, he also made reference to the Anglican pages, that had been martyred for the same reason. Um, I can't imagine what it was like to live in any kind of situation like that. And it's a dictatorial society. You are not a person, you are a subject, a piece of property to the king, the chief, the ruler, and he's making these demands of you that are immoral and they fly against your very faith, your very own personal sovereignty. And to resist is death. And it wasn't just that that St. Charles Lwanga was resisting the advances himself. He was encouraging others to do the same, and he would, like I said, he would run interference uh, for the other pages, and he placed himself at great risk all the time doing this because it's not like he was going to call the police. It's the king, ruler of the country. It's saying no. This is what I want you to do, and you're going to do it or else. So, if you're looking for a cool story to read, definitely look into Saint Charles Lwanga. Um, the man was very brave, and I can see a mile away why he was canonized along with his companions who resisted knowing that they were going to be martyred if they resisted, but they did it anyway. So Saint Charles Lwanga and his companions are our saints of the day.
Very nice. I know you're a big fan of companions.
I
You would
am
like
because that's the
Saint
closest
John of
I'm
Cologne.
probably going to get. Yeah, I'm the closest.
You're
That's
gonna
the
be a
closest I'll probably get to being sainthood. It's kind of like being a roadie. I just ride their
yeah,
coattails. Like, hey, I toured. I just tell everybody I toured with Motley Crue. Really? What'd you play? Nothing. I carried their luggage.
yeah. Well, something to be said for that. You listen. Some people would not be anywhere if it weren't for their companions. So it's a very important role to play.
That's true. Yeah. The companions that you take do play a huge role in how you behave. You know, I like to tell people that peer pressure is only a bad thing if you have bad friends. Like if your
Exactly.
peers are bad, then that's when peer pressure is a bad thing. Um,
Yes.
but yeah, I've read the more detailed version of his story. That's why I was able to kind of ad lib a lot of the stuff that was not on Franciscan media about St. Charles Lwanga.
Mm,
Father Longenecker, actually, who is going to be a guest on this show here soon, he actually has a first class relic of St. Charles Lwanga at his church in Greenville, South Carolina, um, Our Lady of the Rosary. So that's pretty cool.
nice.
And apparently
Very nice.
there's only one known photo of him too, and he was relatively young when he was martyred. So
Yeah.
kudos to him
Yeah.
for having that kind of courage to not only lead himself but place himself in the direct line of danger for other people.
Absolutely. Goes along with everything we've been saying today, right? It's not about how what you say and how loudly you say it, but how you behave and how you act, and that's what you will be remembered for.
Yeah. Now, I mean, I get it. Look, everybody has this. I will die for the faith. That's awesome. It's no different than being a dad, and it's like I'll die for my family. Okay, question. Just because you're willing to die for them, are you willing to live for them? Because not enough people are willing to do that. They're like, oh no, no, no. You know, I'll I'll sit here and fantasize about you know holding the holding the gates closed while my family escapes and sacrifice myself for them. That's great. Um, but I mean, yeah, I expect every guy to be willing to do that for the people he cares about. But how about living for them since you have a very slim chance of ever needing to sacrifice yourself for them? Being willing to do that's cool, but the bigger likelihood is that you're going to be with them for your entire life. So maybe you should worry about living for them instead. And again, this is me saying it to myself too.
But it's very true, isn't it? I mean, it's if you go out in a blaze of glory, that's one moment in time. But getting up every day and rededicating yourself to your family, to your loved ones, to your children, that takes a little bit something more. Being able to do that day in and day out. Um, and I think that's really what's expected of us. Yeah, it's if wonderful if you are martyred at some point. God bless you, and you've got a ticket to paradise right there. But we have to be realistic and know that that's probably not very likely to happen.
Yeah. And just for anybody who's trying to turn around and say, well, it's a violent world out there. Yeah, but to be martyred, you have to absolutely be killed because you won't relinquish the faith, not
Yeah.
because you walked into a bank robbery or you got hit by a car or, you know, you got randomly targeted by a violent person. That's just not how it works, right?
Yeah.
You've got a much bigger chance of living to old age, and maybe you should spend that entire time focusing on living for Christ and living for your loved ones rather than I'll die for them.
Absolutely. Right. You've got to live uh, as though your body's going to last forever, but your soul is going to be lost tomorrow. You have to live.
There you go.
You
I
have to
like
live.
that.
Wait, how's that one go? Yeah, but it's true though. You have to um, you have to treat your body as though you're going to live forever, and treat your soul as though you're going to die tomorrow. And I think that's the way we all should go about it. You have to be prepared for that. You have to be ready for that, and you have to live your life accordingly. So write that down if you want.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm gonna totally quote you on that
Make a note.
and take all the credit for it. I'm gonna tell everybody I taught you. I taught him
Oh,
everything he knows, ladies and gentlemen.
speaking of quotes, that quote from Saint Francis of Assisi. People attribute it to him, but there's no evidence that he actually ever said that. But it is a great quote.
That's why I said
Preach, and if
attributed to him. I didn't
necessary,
say he
use.
said it. It's attributed to him.
Yeah, okay. Just want
Yeah.
to listen, because I don't want to get sued or anything. You know what I'm saying? People go out there and say, "Well, Ed and Jeff
Well, I
said that Saint Francis said this." I'm just
look, if Saint Francis wants to sue me for libel, he can. All right, or slander. It's I didn't write it down. I said it, so it's slander. So if Saint
well, it would
Francis
be
wants to sue me, that'll be a very interesting court case. But we're
it
running
would
out
be
of
his
time.
it would be his
So
estate that would.
this is your yeah, I get it. I get it. Oh, this is going so terribly. All right. So, quick reminder to everyone: download Holy Habits. Go to the App Store. Go to Google Play. Best Catholic habit tracker out there. It's free to download. I use it every day. Ed uses it every day. Sometimes Ed uses it twice a day because he's got Alzheimer's and he forgets he used it once that day. But use it. He doesn't get charged for using it twice. And we're gonna kill this episode now because it just went off the rails terribly. And yeah, it's time to go. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, everybody. Please do not let the content of this episode influence your opinion of the show overall. We'll see you tomorrow.
God bless everybody.